And this is where the teaching becomes uncomfortable for the modern mind, because it asks us to take responsibility not only for our thoughts, but for the emotional state we carry into every moment of our lives. I've found that what was preserved in the oldest traditions is not a formula for asking the universe for things, but a way of becoming the person who already lives in harmony with what is desired. The emphasis was never on forcing reality to change. It was on changing the inner signal that the body and heart are broadcasting at all times. When I look carefully at the way Jesus taught, stripped of theology and dogma, I see a language of inner coherence. He spoke in images that bypassed the intellect and spoke directly to the subconscious. Seeds, soil, harvest, doors, and lamps were not metaphors chosen at random. They were biological truths. A seed does not struggle to grow. It responds to the conditions surrounding it. In the same way, our intentions do not manifest through effort alone, but through the emotional environment we create within ourselves. Modern science now confirms what these teachings implied. The heart generates a measurable electromagnetic field that extends beyond the body, influencing the brain and nervous system. When emotion and intention are aligned, the body enters a state of coherence. In that state, chemistry changes, perception sharpens, and possibilities that were previously invisible become available. This is not mystical thinking. It is physiology responding to meaning. What has been forgotten is that belief was never meant to be passive. Belief is not something we recite or hope for. It is something we feel is already true. I've noticed that when belief remains trapped in the mind, it has very little power. But when belief moves into the body as emotion, it becomes instruction. Cells respond to emotional signals faster than they respond to conscious thoughts. The body listens to how we feel long before it listens to what we say. This helps explain why so many people pray, visualize, or affirm without seeing results. They are asking from a state of lack. Their words describe abundance, but their emotions communicate absence. The biology follows the emotion, not the language. Ancient teachings warned against this inner contradiction long before we had instruments to measure stress hormones and neural patterns. Jesus emphasized feeling as the doorway. He spoke of praying as though the prayer had already been answered. That subtle detail changes everything. It moves us out of the future and into the present. The nervous system cannot distinguish between an experience that is vividly felt and one that is physically occurring. When gratitude, peace, or love are generated internally, the body responds as if the outer condition already exists. I've come to see manifestation not as attracting something new, but as removing the internal resistance to what is already possible. Fear, guilt, and unworthiness create biological states that block perception. When those states dissolve, opportunity seems to appear suddenly, even though it was likely present all along. This is why inner work produces outer change without force. Ancient languages encoded this understanding in words that have lost their original meaning. What we translate as faith was closer to a state of embodied knowing. It was not belief without evidence. It was belief created through inner experience. When the body feels truth, doubt cannot survive. The body becomes the evidence. This also reframes the idea of miracles. A miracle was not a violation of natural law, but a demonstration of a deeper law that most people had forgotten how to access. When coherence is restored between thought, emotion, and belief, the body's healing mechanisms activate. The immune system responds. Regeneration accelerates. The mind becomes flexible instead of rigid. What I find most practical about this teaching is how ordinary it is. While rich reward it does not require special abilities or spiritual titles. It requires awareness. Awareness of the emotional habits we carry. Awareness of the stories we repeat internally. Awareness of how often we rehearse the past instead of inhabiting the present. Every moment offers a choice. We can respond from memory, or we can respond from possibility. The body cannot tell the difference unless we teach it. Repetition is how we teach it. Just as stress practiced daily becomes normal, Peace practiced daily becomes familiar. The biology adapts to whatever state we repeatedly return to. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A single powerful experience may inspire us, but repeated coherent states rewire us. Neural pathways change. Hormonal baselines shift. Even gene expression responds to sustained emotional patterns. Science now calls this epigenetics. Ancient wisdom simply called it living in truth. I've observed that when people genuinely embody this approach, their lives do not become perfect, but they become meaningful. Challenges still arise, but they are met with clarity rather than panic. Decisions are made from intuition rather than fear. Relationships shift, not because others change, but because the signal being sent has changed. Perhaps the most misunderstood part of this teaching is surrender. Surrender was never about giving up. It was about releasing the illusion of control created by fear. When we stop trying to force outcomes, we allow intelligence beyond the analytical mind to participate. This intelligence operates through timing, coincidence. To live this way requires courage, because it asks us to feel before we see. It asks us to trust internal evidence over external proof. And it asks us to become intimate with our inner state, even when it reveals discomfort. Yet this is precisely where transformation begins. Because the moment we become aware of what we are truly feeling, we gain the ability to choose differently. And as that choice becomes practiced, the body begins to reorganize itself, preparing us for possibilities that cannot emerge while we remain trapped in the old emotional patterns, waiting for the outer world to change before we do, and inviting experiences that reflect inner coherence
rather than inner conflict. And this is where the teaching becomes deeply practical instead of abstract. I've seen that the body does not respond to what we want, but to who we believe ourselves to be. Identity is the hidden engine of manifestation. When identity shifts, behavior shifts automatically, and when behavior shifts, outcomes follow without force.
This is why the ancient instruction was to be before trying to do. Doing without being creates exhaustion. Being without doing creates alignment. When we inhabit an inner state consistently, actions arise naturally from that state. There is less resistance, fewer mixed signals, and a clarity that feels almost effortless. Modern neuroscience now tells us that the brain is constantly predicting the future based on past emotional experience. When we change the emotional baseline, we change the prediction, and with it, perception itself. I've noticed that people often try to visualize outcomes while remaining emotionally unchanged. They see images of success, healing, or peace, but their bodies are still conditioned by stress. The nervous system interprets this mismatch as unsafe. Safety is essential for creativity and healing. When the body feels safe, it opens to new patterns. When it feels threatened, it contracts and repeats what it knows. This is where the teaching of the heart becomes essential. The heart is not just a pump. It is a sensory organ, constantly communicating with the brain. The emotional information flows from the heart to the brain more powerfully than from the brain to the heart. When the heart is coherent, the brain follows. Decisions become clearer, intuition sharpens, and perception widens. Ancient practices emphasize gratitude not as politeness, but as technology. Gratitude signals completion. It tells the body that something has already occurred. When gratitude is felt deeply, the stress response shuts down. Cortisol levels drop. Immune function improves. The body enters repair mode. This biological shift is the fertile soil where intention takes root. What's fascinating is that gratitude does not require external proof. It can be generated internally independent of circumstance. This was one of the most radical ideas embedded in the teachings. Freedom does not come from changing the world. It comes from changing the internal response to the world. From that freedom, external change becomes possible. I've worked with individuals who use this understanding to heal relationships, bodies, and life circumstances that once seemed fixed. The common thread was not effort, but sincerity. They stopped pretending. They stopped bypassing uncomfortable emotions. Instead, they learned to feel fully, then choose intentionally. Feeling is not weakness. Feeling is information. When suppressed emotion accumulates, it manifests as tension, illness, or repeated life patterns. The body remembers what the mind forgets. This is why forgiveness was taught as liberation, not morality. Forgiveness releases stored emotional energy. It frees the nervous system from reliving the past. Without forgiveness, the body remains anchored to old signals. Science now shows that unresolved emotional stress alters gene expression related to inflammation and immunity. When emotional coherence is restored, those expressions change. This is not metaphor, it is measurable. The body is listening at all times, translating emotional experience into biological instruction. Another forgotten aspect of the teaching is patience. Growth has its own rhythm. Seeds sprout when conditions are right, not when we demand it. Impatience communicates doubt. It signals that we do not trust the process. Trust is not blind belief. It is familiarity with coherence. When we have experienced alignment even once, the body remembers how to return there. I've also observed that the teaching discourages comparison. Comparison fragments identity. It pulls attention outward instead of inward. When attention is scattered, intention weakens. Ancient wisdom emphasized inner reference points. The kingdom, as it was described, was not external, it was internal, it was a state of awareness. This reframes success entirely. Success becomes resonance rather than accumulation. When we resonate with clarity, opportunities align. People enter and exit our lives naturally. We are guided toward experiences that match our internal state. This does not eliminate challenge, but it gives challenge context and meaning. One of the most misunderstood ideas is surrendering outcome. Surrender does not mean disengagement. It means releasing attachment to a specific form. When we cling to form, we limit intelligence. When we hold intention without attachment, intelligence has room to operate. This intelligence often works through timing we could not predict. The body is the bridge in this process. It is where intention becomes experience. This is why practices that involve breath, posture, and awareness are so powerful. Breath regulates the nervous system. Posture influences hormone levels. Attention directs neural activity. These are simple tools with profound effects. I often encourage people to ask not what they want, but who they are becoming. Becoming precedes having. When identity aligns with intention, manifestation is not something we chase, it unfolds. We notice ourselves responding differently. Old triggers lose their charge. New choices feel natural rather than forced. This does not mean we never experience doubt or fear. It means we recognize them as signals, not commands. Emotion is data. We can acknowledge it without obeying it. Over time, as coherent states become familiar, incoherent states feel foreign. The body learns a new normal. What continues to amaze me is how gentle this process can be. Transformation does not require struggle. It requires honesty. It requires presence. It requires the willingness to feel before seeing. When we practice this, even briefly, life begins to reflect subtle shifts. Conversations change. Opportunities arise. Health improves in small but meaningful ways. And yet, this is only the surface of the teaching, because once we understand how emotion instructs biology and how belief shapes perception, we begin to notice something even deeper unfolding within us, a realization that manifestation is not about controlling reality at all, but about remembering our relationship with it. And as that relationship becomes clearer, The boundaries we once assumed were fixed begin to soften, inviting us into a way of living that feels less like effort and more like participation in an intelligent process that responds the moment we learn how to listen and remain present long enough to notice what has always been communicating back to us through the quiet signals of the body, the rhythm of the breath, and the subtle awareness that emerges when we stop asking the world to change first and instead allow ourselves to embody the state that makes change inevitable as we continue to explore how this inner alignment reshapes not only personal experience but the collective field we are all contributing to, whether we realize it or not, and what that means for the choices we make when no one is watching, and the moments where we decide again and again which end signal we will carry forward into the next unfolding moment of experience. And this collective field is not an abstract idea, but a living interaction shaped by the emotional tone each of us contributes. I've come to understand that coherence is contagious. When one nervous system stabilizes, it subtly influences families feel it, workplaces feel it, even strangers sense it. This may explain why ancient teachings emphasized inner work as service. Changing oneself was never selfish. It was the most direct way to affect the whole. What we broadcast emotionally becomes part of the shared environment. Long before social media or global communication, wisdom traditions recognized that human consciousness does not end at the skin. Our emotional states ripple outward. Modern measurements of electromagnetic fields now hint at this truth. The heart's field extends several feet beyond the body, interacting with the environment and with other hearts. We are not isolated processors. We are participants in a larger system. This reframes responsibility in a powerful way. Responsibility is not blame, it is authorship. When we understand that our inner state is contributing to the collective experience, we naturally become more attentive to what we cultivate inside, not through suppression, but through choice. We learn to pause before reacting. We learn to feel before responding. This pause is where freedom lives. A teaching invites us to become observers of our inner world. Observation creates space. Space allows change. Without awareness, patterns repeat automatically. With awareness, patterns loosen. This is why mindfulness appears across so many ancient paths. Attention is the gateway to transformation. What we notice, we can shift. What we ignore, we reinforce. I've noticed that the body often signals misalignment before the mind admits it. Tightness, fatigue, shallow breathing. These are not inconveniences, they are messages. When we listen early, adjustment is gentle. When we ignore signals, the body amplifies them. Symptoms become teachers. They point us back to coherence. This perspective dissolves the separation between spirituality and biology. There is no division. Spiritual insight without embodiment remains theory. Biology without meaning becomes mechanical. When meaning enters biology, healing accelerates. Purpose organizes chemistry. This is not poetic language. It is observable in how people recover faster when they feel connected to something meaningful. Another forgotten aspect of the teaching is humility. Not humility as self-diminishment, but as alignment with reality. Humility recognizes that intelligence flows through us, not from us alone. When we release the need to control every outcome, we align with a larger order. This alignment reduces stress and increases adaptability. The body thrives in adaptability. Adaptability is essential in a changing world. Fixed identities struggle. Fluid identities evolve. When belief becomes rigid, perception narrows. When belief remains flexible, learning continues. Ancient wisdom valued flexibility of mind paired with steadiness of heart. This combination creates resilience. Resilience is not endurance through suffering, it is recovery through coherence. A resilient system returns to balance quickly. It does not avoid disturbance, it integrates it. This is true for ecosystems, nervous systems, and societies. When individuals cultivate coherence, they become stabilizing nodes within the collective. I've also observed that joy plays a crucial role in this process. Joy is not frivolous, it is a biological signal of safety and alignment. When joy is present, creativity expands, problem solving improves, immune function strengthens. Joy was often treated as sacred in ancient cultures because it indicated harmony between inner and outer worlds. What prevents joy is often the belief that we must earn it through achievement. This belief keeps us future-focused and present-deprived. The teaching suggests the opposite. Joy is accessed now, and achievement follows as a byproduct. When the body feels fulfilled, action becomes inspired rather than forced. This understanding changes how we relate to time. Time becomes less of an enemy and more of a rhythm. Past and future lose their grip when attention rests in the present. The nervous system calms. Decision-making improves. We become available to subtle cues that guide action more accurately than analysis alone. Analysis has its place, but it is not the source of wisdom. Wisdom arises from integration. It emerges when intellect, emotion, and intuition communicate. This internal dialogue requires silence. Silence is not emptiness, it is receptivity. Ancient practices created silence intentionally because insight needs space to surface. In silence, we begin to notice patterns. We notice how certain thoughts trigger certain emotions. We notice how certain emotions influence posture, breath, and behavior. This noticing dissolves unconscious habits. Conscious choice replaces automatic reaction. Freedom expands incrementally. I often remind myself that transformation is not linear. It spirals. We revisit lessons at deeper levels. What once seemed resolved returns with nuance. This is not failure. It is refinement. Each cycle offers greater clarity and compassion. Compassion for self naturally extends to others. Compassion was central to the teaching, not as moral obligation, but as recognition of shared experience. When we see others as reflections rather than adversaries, conflict softens, cooperation becomes possible. The collective field shifts subtly toward coherence. This may be the most radical implication of the teaching. Inner alignment is not only personal healing, it is social healing. When individuals regulate their nervous systems, collective stress decreases. When individuals choose coherence over reaction, polarization loses fuel. We are living in a time where this understanding is urgently needed. The pace of change challenges nervous systems worldwide. Ancient wisdom offers tools not to escape the world, but to meet it skillfully. Breath, awareness, gratitude, forgiveness, these are stabilizing forces. Come to trust that the body knows how to return to balance when given the right signals. Our role is not to command it, but to listen and cooperate. Cooperation replaces struggle. Flow replaces force. This shift is subtle yet transformative. As we practice embodying the state we wish to experience, we discover that manifestation is not something added to life, but something revealed within it. Layers of resistance dissolve. Simplicity emerges. What once felt distant feels intimate. And still there is more to uncover, because as we deepen into this way of living, questions arise that challenge even our most refined assumptions, questions about identity, intention, and the deeper mechanics of consciousness itself, inviting us to explore how awareness shapes reality at levels we have barely begun to examine, and how this ancient understanding continues to unfold as we remain present, curious, and willing to listen to what the moment is quietly asking of us next, as the process continues to reveal itself through experience rather than explanation, and through the subtle choices we make when we notice the familiar pull of old patterns returning and decide whether to follow them again or pause just long enough to sense the deeper intelligence waiting beneath the surface of the next breath and the next unfolding moment where the real teaching lives and continues to invite our participation without ever demanding belief, but only asking for direct experience as we move forward into what is not yet fully understood, but already gently communicating its presence. And it is in this space of direct experience that the teaching becomes truly alive. I've learned that understanding alone changes very little. Information can inspire, but embodiment transforms. The difference lies in repetition. What we repeatedly feel becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes normal. And what feels normal becomes our reality, regardless of whether it serves us or not. This is why intention without practice fades. The body is conditioned through experience, not ideas. When we intentionally return to a coherent emotional state, even for brief moments, we begin to retrain the nervous system. Those moments accumulate. Over time, they outweigh the older patterns of stress and reaction. The shift is gradual but unmistakable. One of the most subtle aspects of this teaching is the role of imagination. Imagination was never meant as fantasy or escape. It is a biological simulator. When used consciously, it prepares the nervous system for new possibilities. The body rehearses what the mind imagines vividly. This rehearsal changes neural circuitry. It conditions expectation. Expectation is powerful. The body organizes itself around what it expects to experience. If expectation is rooted in fear, the body prepares for threat. If expectation is rooted in trust, the body prepares for engagement. This preparation influences posture, tone of voice, facial expression, and even the timing of our responses. Others react to these signals unconsciously. I've noticed that when expectation changes, interactions change without explanation. People respond differently. Opportunities arise unexpectedly. It can feel mysterious, but it is consistent with biology. We are constantly reading and responding to one another's signals. Inner state becomes social reality. Ancient teachings place great emphasis on vigilance, not in a defensive sense, but as awareness of what we are allowing to occupy our inner space. Every thought we entertain carries an emotional tone. Every emotional tone instructs the body. Vigilance simply means choosing intentionally rather than habitually. This does not require perfection. It requires honesty. When we notice ourselves in fear, we don't suppress it. We acknowledge it. Acknowledgement alone reduces its grip. Then we can choose a different state, not by force, but by remembering how it feels to be coherent. Memory of coherence is enough to begin the shift. The body remembers coherence even after long periods of stress. It is the natural state. We return to it more easily than we think once we stop resisting the process. Resistance is often created by judgment. Judgment tightens the nervous system. Acceptance relaxes it. Acceptance does not mean agreement. It means allowing what is present to be felt without struggle. From this relaxed state, insight emerges. Insight is not something we generate. It arises spontaneously when the system is balanced. This is why solutions often appear when we stop trying to think our way out of problems. Stillness invites intelligence. I've seen how this applies to creativity as well. Creativity is not forced innovation. It is the expression of coherence. When the mind and body are aligned, ideas flow naturally. Artists, scientists, and inventors throughout history have described this state in similar terms, regardless of culture. It is a universal experience. This reinforces the idea that consciousness is not limited to belief systems. It is a shared human capacity. Techniques may differ, languages may vary, but the underlying mechanics remain consistent. Attention, emotion, and intention form the foundation. Another layer of the teaching involves humility toward the unknown. We do not need to understand everything for it to work. In fact, excessive need for certainty often blocks experience. When we allow mystery curiosity replaces controlled curiosity, keeps the nervous system open. Controlled keeps it rigid. Rigid systems break under pressure. Flexible systems adapt. This is true in biology, psychology, and society. The teaching invites flexibility without chaos, structure without rigidity, discipline without harshness. These balances are subtle, but they define sustainable transformation. I've noticed that as people practice this way of living, their relationship with effort changes. Effort becomes focused rather than strained. Action becomes timely rather than rushed. There is a sense of being carried by a current rather than swimming against it. This does not remove responsibility. It refines it. Refined responsibility includes rest. Rest is not laziness. It is integration. Without integration, experiences remain fragmented. Sleep, silence, and stillness allow the nervous system to reorganize. Ancient traditions honored cycles of action and rest because they understood this rhythm intuitively. Ignoring rhythm leads to burnout. Burnout is not a failure of will, it is a failure of alignment. When we push against our biology, biology responds with exhaustion. When we work with it, energy renews itself. This cooperation is central to the forgotten teaching. I also see how this understanding reshapes our relationship with adversity. Adversity becomes feedback rather than punishment. It highlights misalignment. Instead of asking why something is happening to us, we begin asking what it is revealing within us. This shift changes everything. When adversity is met with curiosity instead of resistance, learning accelerates. Emotional charge decreases. The body stays regulated. From this regulated state, we make wiser choices. Those choices alter trajectories. Over time, we begin to trust ourselves differently. Not because life becomes predictable, but because our inner response becomes reliable. We know how to return to coherence. That knowledge creates confidence that does not depend on circumstances. This may be what the teaching meant by peace that surpasses understanding. It is not peace because everything is resolved. It is peace because the inner system is stable enough to meet whatever arises. Stability does not mean numbness. It means responsiveness without overwhelm. As this stability deepens, our influence expands naturally. We become examples rather than advocates. Others sense the difference. They may not know why, but they feel safer, clearer, more present in our presence. This is teaching without words. And still the process continues. Because each layer of coherence reveals a deeper layer of inquiry, inviting us to explore how intention operates beyond the personal level and how collective patterns emerge from countless individual choices, drawing us into questions about how far this inner influence extends and what becomes possible when enough individuals learn to regulate their inner state consciously, creating a tipping point where coherence begins to outweigh chaos, and where the ancient teaching reveals itself not as a belief system to adopt, but as a lived practice that continues to unfold through attention, emotion, and awareness as we move forward into the next moment, sensing that there is still something essential being asked of us, something that cannot be fully explained, only experienced, as we remain present enough to notice the subtle invitation forming beneath the surface of our thoughts and the quiet signal arising just before the next choice is made and the next direction begins to take shape within the unfolding field of consciousness. And it is precisely in that moment before the next choice that the deepest teaching quietly reveals itself. I've come to see that manifestation is less about creating something new and more about recognizing what is already trying to emerge through us. When we are distracted, rushed, or emotionally overwhelmed, we miss the signal. When we are present, the signal becomes obvious. Presence is not passive. It is alert, responsive, and grounded. In presence, we notice subtle shifts in emotion and thought before they solidify into action. This awareness gives us access to choice. Without it, we live on autopilot, repeating familiar patterns while believing we are choosing freely. Freedom begins where awareness begins. This is why ancient wisdom emphasized watchfulness. To watch does not mean to judge, it means to observe without interference. Observation alone alters the observed. When we observe a thought or emotion calmly, it begins to lose its compulsive power. The nervous system registers safety. From safety, regulation follows. I've noticed that many people attempt to change their lives by changing circumstances first. They move, switch jobs, end relationships, or start new ones, hoping for relief. Sometimes this helps temporarily, but without an internal shift, the same patterns reappear in new forms. The teaching points inward, not to ignore the world, but to meet it differently. Meeting the world differently begins with emotional literacy. Can we name what we are feeling without becoming it? Can we feel fear without letting it decide? Can we feel desire without attachment? These skills were once cultivated intentionally. Today they are often overlooked, yet they remain essential. Emotion is energy in motion. When it flows, it informs. When it stagnates, it distorts. The body's intelligence depends on emotional movement. Suppressed emotion creates static. Expressed and integrated emotion restores flow. This is why honest self-reflection is so healing. It reestablishes communication within the system. The teaching also invites us to reconsider effort. There is effort that aligns and effort that resists. Aligned effort feels purposeful and sustainable. Resistant effort feels draining and tense. The difference is subtle but noticeable in the body. Learning to listen to these signals guides us toward wiser action. I often ask myself whether a choice feels expansive or constrictive. Expansion does not mean comfort, it means coherence. Sometimes expansion includes challenge, but even challenge can feel clean when aligned. Constriction, on the other hand, feels heavy and fragmented. The body knows the difference instantly. This bodily knowing was honored in ancient times. Wisdom was not abstract, it was lived. Knowledge that could not be embodied was considered incomplete. This perspective shifts how we evaluate truth. Truth becomes something we recognize through resonance, not something we accept through authority. Resonance is immediate. When something aligns with our inner state, the body relaxes, breath deepens, attention stabilizes. These responses cannot be faked. They are automatic. Learning to trust them restores confidence in our own perception. Of course, perception can be clouded by conditioning. This is why unlearning is as important as learning. Many beliefs were absorbed unconsciously, often in moments of vulnerability. Those beliefs shaped emotional responses that became habitual. Bringing them into awareness dissolves their hold. I've seen how powerful it is when someone realizes that a long-held belief is no longer true. The release is physical. Shoulders drop, breath opens, energy returns. This is not intellectual insight alone, it is biological relief. The system reorganizes around a new understanding. This process is ongoing. There is no final arrival. Each layer of insight reveals another layer of refinement. This is not discouraging, it is enlivening. It means growth remains available. Meaning continues to deepen. The teaching encourages patience with this process. Impatience often signals mistrust. Trust grows through experience. Each time we return to coherence intentionally, trust strengthens. The body learns that regulation is accessible. Fear loses its authority. As fear loses authority, curiosity takes its place. Curiosity is open-ended. It invites exploration rather than defense. In curiosity, mistakes become information. Setbacks become adjustments. This orientation supports resilience. Resilience, in this context, is not toughness. It is flexibility. Flexible systems bend without breaking. They adapt quickly. They recover efficiently. Human resilience emerges from emotional regulation paired with meaning. Meaning organizes experience. Without meaning, even success feels empty. With meaning, even difficulty feels purposeful. The teaching suggests that meaning is not assigned externally. It is generated internally through alignment with values and intention. Values become embodied when lived consistently. Integrity is the alignment between inner values and outer actions. When integrity is present, the nervous system stabilizes, inner conflict dissolves, energy once spent on self-contradiction becomes available for creativity. Creativity flourishes in coherence. It is not limited to art. It appears in problem-solving, communication, and innovation. When the mind is regulated, it connects ideas fluidly. Solutions emerge organically. This organic emergence is often mistaken for luck. In reality, it is preparedness meeting opportunity. Preparedness is internal. Opportunity is everywhere. Alignment allows us to recognize and engage. I've come to appreciate how small practices produce large effects over time. A few minutes of intentional breathing, a moment of gratitude, a pause before reacting. These are not trivial. They are cumulative. They reshape identity gradually. Identity is not fixed. It is reinforced through repetition. When we repeatedly choose coherence, coherence becomes who we are. When coherence becomes identity, manifestation becomes expression rather than effort. Expression feels natural. It does not strain. It flows. This flow is often described as being in alignment. Alignment is not mystical. It is physiological and psychological congruence. As this congruence deepens, our relationship with uncertainty changes. Uncertainty no longer triggers panic. It invites curiosity. We become comfortable not knowing the outcome, trusting our ability to respond. This trust extends beyond the personal. We begin to sense our participation in a larger unfolding, not as passive observers, but as contributors. Each regulated nervous system adds stability to the collective. This realization carries quiet responsibility, not pressure, but intention. Knowing that our inner state matters encourages care. Care for ourselves, care for others, care for the choices we make when we think no one is watching. And perhaps this is where the teaching gently leads us next into a deeper inquiry about how personal coherence interacts with collective consciousness, and whether the subtle choices we make in private moments ripple outward in ways we have only begun to understand, inviting us to remain attentive as new questions arise and the next layer of insight begins to form just beyond the edge of what we currently know, waiting to be recognized in the pause before the next breath, the next thought, the next decision that quietly shapes the direction of our experience, and the evolving relationship between awareness and reality as it continues to unfold into something not yet fully visible, but already quietly influencing the path ahead.